Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of December of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. Once again, the most important topic of the previous 24 hours is attack on the residence of the President of the Russian Federation, the territory of the Novgorod region. This information today was stated by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. They stated that between the 28th and 29th of December, Ukraine launched 91 attack drones on the residence of the President of the Russian Federation in the Novgorod region. The Russians are saying that they managed to bring down every single drone, but this is, as we understand right now, this is the first case, the first situation since the beginning of the special military operation when, let's say, one side of the conflict officially tried to attack positions or the place where the leader of the other side was located. This is the first case since the beginning of the special military operation. Maybe there were some hidden cases or something that wasn't revealed or published by pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian sources, but this is the first official case. Obviously, this situation changes the game. During the previous 24 hours, Russian authorities made lots of statements. The response to Kiev's attacks will not be diplomatic. They should not count on that. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said. Another important stated that Russia has identified targets for retaliatory strikes and the timing of their execution. Lavrov stated, referring to the recent drone attack by Ukraine on Putin's residence. Another important statement is that the State Duma insists on a tout response following the drone attack on Putin's residence. Such behavior cannot be forgiven. That was stated by Volodin. Trump was shocked and outraged by the Ukraine Armed Force attempted attack on Putin's residence. That was stated by Ushakov. Thank God we didn't give Kiev tomahawks. That was stated by the President of the United States of America. Another important statement is that the Kiev could not take the decision to attack Putin's state residence on its own. It was given the green light by its European masters. So as you can see, the Russians are very angry, and most likely the Russians are preparing a strike back. But most of all, the Russians will attack. This attack is going to take place within the next 2 or 3 days, maybe this upcoming night, maybe between the 31st and the 1st of January, maybe on between the 1st and the 2nd of January, but obviously within the next 3 or 5 days. And most likely the Russians will attack with the Oreshnik system. So Russians have just one shot, and of course the most important question, if you have just a shot, what kind of target you're going to attack with this missile, with this system? Ukrainians are saying that Russians are preparing an attack on Ukrainian government buildings in Kiev. That was stated by Zelensky probably. Other sources are saying that Russians will attack objects of critical or energy infrastructure. So lots of opinions. Some people are saying that Russia may attack bridges through the river of Dnipro because, and most likely this attack might take place somewhere in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia, because now everybody talks just about the city of Zaporizhzhia, that this is the next target. For example, during the previous 24 hours, the president of Russia also said about the city of Zaporizhzhia. He stated that Russia must continue their offensive operation to take control over the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. That was stated by the president of the Russian Federation. So this is the situation. The Russians are preparing themselves to continue offensive operation further, and the Russians are going to use just one shot with the Oreshnik system, and the target that the Russians are going to choose, they have already chose this target, but we will understand this in coming days or even minutes. But Zelensky continue warming up the situation. For example, Zelensky believes that the war could end in 2026, or Putin will have to declare mobilization due to a significant reduction in the army. That was stated by the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, during the previous 24 hours. So as we can see, Ukraine, Zelensky are not going to give up. They're going to continue, which means that the next year is going to be very, very hot. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Odessa region. The sources are saying that during the previous 24 hours the Russians attacked the city of Odessa, and as a result of attack a vessel was damaged and destroyed. Most likely Ukrainians were receiving maybe arms or something like this. As for the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians continue their build-up. They're moving very slowly, but they're moving step by step. According to information we have, according to pro-Russian sources, currently the Russians are just within 15 kilometers from the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. So these are the latest changes that you can see on the ground. This is the situation by the end of the 29th, and this is the 30th of December. And if we take these configuration, the front line, and if we calculate the distance between positions of the armored force of the Russian Federation in the northern part of Primorskaya and the southern part of the city of Zaporizhzhia, then we will have this number. We will have 15 kilometers. So most likely these changes on the ground are correct. The Russians most likely managed to improve their positions in this area. Furthermore, this information also was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources added additional territory to the north of the settlement of Primorskaya by adding additional gray zone. So this is the situation in this area, just 15 kilometers between the city of Zaporizhzhia and the edge positions of the armored force of the Russian Federation. But when talking about the Zaporizhzhia agglomeration, then we can say that the Russians have answered the Zaporizhzhia agglomeration, because this is already the city, the village of Mala Katerinovka, and as you can see, this village goes in the northern direction, and then this village first answers the village of Kushuhum without borders, without any gaps. So the next village starts, then it goes towards the village of Balabina, also without any gaps, without any borders, and then Balabina enters the city of Zaporizhzhia. So basically, the Russians have already answered the Zaporizhzhia agglomeration, and let's see what is going to be next. As for the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, during the previous 12 hours, 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions in the northern part. This information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources and by neutral mappers. So these are the changes on the ground, and this is a very important, let's say, improvement, because now we see that Russians managed to connect the city of Gulay-Polye to the Russian, let's say, main logistic of the southern part, of the southern regions. So this is the road R85 that goes, let's say, from the settlement of Mala Takmachka in the direction of the city of Gulay-Polye. Now Russians will start receiving more and more weapons, soldiers, manpower to continue offensive operation further. Furthermore, from the same area, we start receiving more and more videos and updates of how Russians were attacking soldiers of the armored forces of Ukraine that were moving in this area. So this is the first attack. This is the second attack in the area of the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. So Russians are attacking this territory. So as you can see, the Russians even didn't stop when the battle for the settlement of Gulay-Polye finished. The Russians continue advancing, and most likely in coming days we will start receiving first updates and first reports from the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the area of the settlement of Ternovate. Ukrainians were trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to stabilize the situation in this area, in the area of the village of Ternovate, and not allow the Russians to establish complete control over the territory. But the Russians were bombing and attacking the main supply and logistic roads in this direction, with the purpose not to allow Ukrainians to introduce additional forces and to reinforce this direction. So in coming days we expect additional changes. We're not talking about tomorrow, but obviously during the first dates of January of 2026. Now let's move further. Another important update from this area is that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainian authorities announced 2 evacuations. So, according to information we have, in the Dnipropetrovsk region, a decision was also made to evacuate more than 40 settlements. The sources are saying that Ukrainians evacuated the territory to the north and the northwest of the settlement of Pokrovskaya. So, according to information we have, this territory is obliged to be evacuated as soon as possible. So, which means that Ukrainians are preparing themselves before the beginning of very heavy clashes for this territory. Furthermore, as it is written in this article, the Ukrainians was also made a decision to evacuate, so which means that this is not the first one. The first decision was made in the Chernihiv region, and this is a very important. Mandatory evacuation has been declared for 14 border villages in the Chernihiv region. These villages are located in the Novgorod-Seversky, Semenovsky, Snovsky, and Gorodnotsky communities. The border area are subject to daily shelling, but approximately 300 people remain there. So Ukrainians are saying that they decided decided to evacuate this territory as well. And this is a very important situation because we haven't received from this area anything since the beginning of the special military operation. Only in 2022 the Russians were attacking this territory during the beginning of this war, but later from that moment we haven't received anything, and now for some reason the Ukrainians decided to evacuate this territory. There are a few possible, let's say options. First one is that the city of Chernihiv was bombed by the Russians, has been bombed by the Russians significantly recently. Lots of attacks, and according to information we have, there is a partial blackout in the entire region. So that is why the Ukrainians decided to evacuate population, because there is no possibility, no way how to survive. But from the other side, Ukrainians evacuated this part of the Chernihiv region because maybe the Russians are accumulating their forces in this area with the purpose to open the second front line and attack in the direction of the city of Kiev and Chernihiv from the north. This is also a possible, let's say, option that we can expect in coming days, or at least during the spring early spring offensive operation, or early spring or spring military campaign. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24-48 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly. We received videos from the territory of the settlement of Novoshakhova. Pro-Ukrainian sources published several videos of how they were attacking Russian soldiers in this area. In this video, we can see one of the attacks. Here we can see another attack. So we have two attacks that confirm Russian control over the territory, and based on these videos, we have adjusted the map. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. Yesterday, if you remember, several neutral mappers reported that the settlement was taken by Russians, and today we received the video proofs. At the same time, we received the report that Russians entered the settlement of Belitskaya. We believe that Russians entered the settlement from its southeastern part, and currently there are very heavy clashes. We were waiting for additional updates about the situation in this area, but as of the end of the 30th of December, just the only report that the Russians began clashes, but without changes on the ground. The Konstantinovka direction, to my opinion, is the most probably covered with fog of war area. I would like to remind you that during the previous 10 days, the commander of the Group of Forces South made 2 or 3 statements and reports that Russians control up to 50% of buildings of the city of Konstantinovka, but when talking about this map or any other mappers, we can't find this on the map, on any map. So it seems that there is some gap between the reality and reports that we can see published by the Minister of Defense and the General Staff. And another important thing, that we continue receiving lots of videos of how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the city limits, not inside but along, which means, for example, this video confirms positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. And every day we receive more and more videos, and all of them confirms that the city limits and the border of the city of Konstantinovka is under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. And from this configuration, very difficult to understand how exactly the Russians are able to control more than 50% of buildings of the city of Konstantinovka if the border of the city is under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. As for the Slaviansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published, as you can see, with FPV drone attacks, but the most important, in my opinion, are coming from the Slaviansk power station. We have 2 videos from this area, and in these videos we can see how Russians were attacking positions and forces of the armed forces of Ukraine along the perimeter of the Slaviansk power station. This is a very important asset. The Russians are trying to establish control over the territory without dealing significant damage to this power station, because this is a key infrastructural object that the Russians are planning to use in the future, and everybody understands if the power station is destroyed, then this can lead to complete collapse and to humanitarian catastrophe for the entire region. So that is why both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to save the power station, but most likely the power station could be destroyed if Ukrainians decide to withdraw from their positions. As for the Siversk direction, Siversk-Liman area, just FPV drone attacks without changes. As for the city of Liman, we continue receiving updates of how Russians attacking and destroying vehicles of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, but without changes. This is the same area. We can see the same story in this area as we can see in the area of the city of Konstantinovka, when we have a very huge gap between the reality on the ground, between maps of different mappers and reports that are being published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. According to these reports, Russians are already on the inside of the city and that there are very heavy clashes, and the Russians control a huge part of the settlement. But when talking about maps, we can't find this never anywhere. As for the, let's say, north, as for the Slaviansk direction, north and Slaviansk direction, during the previous 12 hours, 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published lots of videos of how they were counter-attacking the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the area of Sosnovo and Yarova. Ukrainians carry out counter-attacks and they managed to secure these territories. So this is a very weird situation because nobody shown these territories as territories under control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and Ukrainians shown a video where they were counter-attacking these territories. Based on this video, we will not watch them because there are violence, so that's why we will not watch these videos, but very weird situation, and it seems that lots of mappers, by the way, adjusted their maps in these areas, but we haven't, because we came to conclusion that most likely those videos were something like media videos where Ukrainians were attacking empty buildings just to show that they're fighting with Russians along the line of combat contact. So it was just a propaganda movie, and lots of sources used that propaganda movie for the purposes to adjust the map. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we also received a very strange video published by pro-Russian sources. We're talking about this one. Here we can see how Russians with FPV drones were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the northeastern part of the city of Kupiansk. And here we don't see snow, but it's before snow came to this region, as you can see. But for example, this video was geolocated, this attack was geolocated, and this is exactly the building that was attacked by FPV drone of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So which means that when the Russians were attacking this territory, the Ukrainians had their positions there. So the one thing is that there is no snow in this area during the video, which means that video was made maybe up to 10 days ago. But from the other side, this video shows us that when the video was made, Ukrainians had control over the territory, which obviously something that doesn't correlate and corresponds with statements that were made by the commander of the group of forces west. So maybe this is the reality. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to break through Russia's defense and the northeastern part of the settlement, and if this information is correct, then Ukrainians managed to cut the main supply and logistic lines that the Russians used to have to support their contingent in the central part of the city. So we are waiting for additional updates, but once again, if this information is correct, then most likely we can start counting days. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.